What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and for today's video, I'm gonna break down all of the cards coming to Spotlight caches in September, the amazing Spider season in Marvel Snap, and Lily is here with me as well to help me review some cards. And I'm going to be looking at this from the perspective of a free-to-play player. That might color some perception, and it also means that before we can talk about this season with Symbiote Spider-Man, we kind of have to talk about last season too, because now is the first time that free-to-play players have access to Kate Bishop through the token shop. And I think she's pretty good. I think she's maybe even a little bit better than I thought she was initially. I did not consider the synergy that she would just have in junk decks and junk bounce decks. Some of those lists have really impressed me, and I've seen her in a number of lists as I've been covering Marvel Snap tournaments. So again, like, this rating is basically like 100% spend 6,000 tokens on her immediately. I don't think that she's quite there, but I do not fault you if you do spend your 6,000 tokens on Kate Bishop. I think that she's one of the better season pass cards that we've seen in a while, and more than that, she just opens up a lot of fun decks. I'm probably going to try to purchase her myself because I also got Wakan and Marvel Boy, which I knew would be really good with her. So I think that she has a pretty high rating because of her synergy with those cards as well, and overall can just slot into a large variety of decks, really. So yeah, that is where I'd rate Hawkeye Kate Bishop. Currently, I'm putting Symbiote Spider-Man, which maybe I should actually put myself behind this. I'll cut off my face a little bit so you can read all of the text of the new cards as I flash them up. Symbiote Spider-Man is the new season pass card, so as a free-to-play player, I don't really have to get too much into the weeds with how good this card is just yet, but I think that it is pretty good. I'm really scared about its possible interactions with Galactus. I think that that's just going to be a really hard thing to play around and seems really strong to me. But we'll see how that goes as the season shakes out, and I'll have a final verdict on that one by the end of the season, but no more advice for that. It's out of sight, out of mind as a free-to-play player. I did, though, want to throw on the screen my ratings from last season just to give sort of a way to gauge the other cards that we're going to be talking about throughout this video. And Marvel Boy, I think I initially actually placed above Hawkeye Kate Bishop, but like I said, I think that she turned out to be a little bit better than I thought. Emperor Hulkling, I might put other cards into D tier that aren't as bad as Emperor Hulkling. He could honestly go down here at F tier. He just won't like stick around here the way that this website is set up. But this card is like really terrible, I think. So I don't like count other cards out just because they're D tier, but I don't know. I mean, D tier also just means skip them. And now let's skip along to our second card of the season, our first card coming to Spotlight caches, and that is Silver Sable. Silver Sable. On reveal, it steals 2 power from the top card of your opponent's deck. Of course, it's going to add that power to itself. And at first, I was really not hot on Silver Sable. Honestly, I might still be there because she's kind of like an America Chavez. She's a little bit better than that, especially if you're bouncing her and getting additional value that way. I just put out a YouTube short where my opponent played a Silver Sable into Sinister London. That was kind of cool, but even though she's a much better America Chavez, she's still an America Chavez, and almost worse than that, because America you can build around with some other synergistic cards. You can play it with Brood, you can play it with Sebastian Shaw, but Silver Sable doesn't really have that same luxury because you're putting that Affliction onto cards in your opponent's deck. Sure, you could play her with like Ajax or something. It's not really something I am excited to do though. So I think she's going to get a... Oh, sorry. Everything else is moving around here too. She's going to get a C tier here from me, though, I think. And it's probably a high C tier. I don't know. Is she better than Speed? Worse than Speed? I am even going to order cards along in the tiers. I think she's probably worse than Speed. I think that Speed is replaceable in anything that you'd play him in, but is more playable than Silver Sable, which I think is like kind of a trap. I don't think she's as replaceable as Speed, but I don't think that she's doing things that you want to be doing, and ultimately that is my verdict here. US Agent is also coming alongside Silver Sable, and there are some fans of US Agent, but I'm not really impressed with it, to be honest. I don't think that it really winds up seeing that much play in decks that are that good. Honestly, and yeah, here's where like the Hulkling is kind of going to throw people off, because US Agent is clearly better than Emperor Hulkling, one of the worst cards that we've had in a while. But I'm really not impressed with US Agent. I think that it's kind of terrible across the board. So that's my verdict on these first two cards, but Mockingbird is also in Spotlight Caches right now, and that definitely complicates some things, because Mockingbird, it's been nerfed, but it is still a fantastic card. This was my pick of the season back in like, I don't know, January or February when it first premiered. I think that Mockingbird is still fantastic. It's like, you cannot not play it in RSM. And for that reason alone, it's really good. You also want to put it in all of your Thanos decks. Loki decks aren't really a thing anymore, but there's also like other decks that Mockingbird has found her way into, with Mysterio and Squirrel Girl, things like that, and some of those are seeing more play with Marvel Boy and pumps up to Gilgamesh as well. So Mockingbird, S tier, best card of the season in Spotlight Caches. So if you do not have Mockingbird, you might want to open up this week for US Agent and Silver Sable along with that, and definitely make sure that you have this card. It is not going to... You could always not have Mockingbird in any of the... Well, most of the decks that I named. In the decks with like Mysterio and Squirrel Girl and Scar, those decks need Mockingbird. RSM doesn't need anything. You can play whatever the heck you want in RSM, but it's going to make those decks a lot better as well, and Thanos counts for that. Next, we have Madam Web. And, okay, great. Yeah, just a little bit of lag when I change my screen here, but let's throw up the text for Madam Web. Ongoing, you can move one of your other cards away from here each turn. Now, this is a tough to evaluate card, because this is not an effect that we currently have access to in Marvel Snap. Well, we kind of do. We have things like Cloak. We have... I guess it's really just Cloak. But this card could potentially take a move deck and move it up another level. And that is what's really cool about Madam Web. Those aren't typically decks that I want to be playing. Maybe Madam will take those to another level though and make them actually playable. I think it's tough because we're also looking at a 2-1 here. Whereas you look at Cloak, that card justifies itself, it's a 2-4. So you really, really have to be building around this and getting value out of it every single turn. I think that if you can, it's a really cool card, and it's getting a little bit more points over Speed and Silver Sable because it's not replaceable. If Madam Web winds up being good, it's going to be essential in the decks that it is good in. Because those decks aren't good right now, so maybe Madam Web will take those a little bit further. We also have Silk coming out in week 2. And Silk's an interesting one. I think I'm going to put it at C tier, but it could find its way down to D, like top of D, because I think this card's great. It's a 2/5. It's got cool synergies with Kraven and stuff like that. With all the other move stuff coming along this season, I think that probably does bump it up to C, because if move decks are good, I think that Silk is a fun card to play in those decks. Silk has not been seeing much play recently. The Angela Kraven decks that would previously care about Silk in the past have kind of moved on from Silk specifically, so it's not super important, but I think that it is still a pretty strong card. But yeah, it's just not really seeing that much play. One card that is seeing a lot more play recently, though, is Alioth. And I think I'll slot Alioth into right here. It's tricky because I've been playing Marvel Boy. If you've been watching my YouTube shorts recently, you'll see Marvel Boy in a lot of those. And Alioth is seeing some play, though, in its own right. Excuse me, I know I just coughed a second ago. I want to get some water. I probably won't edit that out, though, to be honest. But Alioth has started to see more play in Arana lists that are battling for priority. It doesn't see too much consistent play outside of those, but I say consistent play because Alioth is a interesting card that if your opponent is not expecting it, it actually gets a lot stronger. And I've been surprised by some Alioths in just like some Marvel Boy decks even, and just as like a really solid card to play on top of the curve. Does it eke out Symbiote Spider-Man? Honestly, it might. But I think that Symbiote Spider-Man, for the similar thing, like for the... This isn't going to be replaceable in the decks that it's good in, and most of the decks running Alioth could replace it. So I think that Alioth is very good right now. It's going to get into the big A tier for Alioth, but it is, not going to be better than Symbiote Spider-Man, I don't think. And then speaking of A cards, we also have Arana, which I will throw up on the screen right here. So this has Activate, give the next card you play +2 power, and move it to the right. So my first reaction to this is that it's not really doing anything extremely new, other than the fact that it is an Activate card. But the fact that it is an Activate card, I think actually opens up a lot of lines for these Phoenix Force decks, because now you can play Arana just on turn 1 or turn 2, and you have better curves now, is basically what we're getting into. Though there are also some interesting things that you can do with Arana and Shuri as well, being able to move the cards that you Shuri, which was previously possible with Ghost Spider, but definitely a little bit trickier. And I think that just being an improvement in the Phoenix Force decks is enough to say, yeah, this is kind of going to be a real card at the very least in those decks, and then also in whatever move decks might wind up popping up. I don't think that it's, we'll look at the other 2 cards in the Spotlight Caches with it in just a moment. If you have the other 2 cards, I could see passing on Arana even if you think it's good, just because you can still play Phoenix Force without this card. Obviously, Phoenix Force is currently, but there's a lot of top players that swear by Phoenix Force as one of their favorite decks, and this definitely slots right into there. So think that for that reason alone, it can justify a B tier. I will be throwing Miss Marvel. Oops. Sorry, this website's a little bit tricky here. Oh, Miss Marvel already got onto the graphic here. And honestly, D tier is not crazy for her. Let me get this off screen. I've previously referred to her as the best card in Marvel Snap that isn't seeing play. And one of the reasons that she can't really see play right now, there's so much junk right now in Marvel Snap. And although White Widow is never really going to mess up your Miss Marvel, the arrows will from Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, and there's some other junk going on right now with like Green Goblins and stuff that I think you'd rather avoid. And so for that reason, Miss Marvel might have to make its way down to D tier. Yeah, unfortunately. I do think that she's, again, like one of the best cards not seeing play right now. But yeah, I mean, if we just look at, I do think that she's better than US Agent, but I think that she's worse than all of these things in C tier with the caveat that Madam Web is kind of just in here because she seems cool. Sage is another, well, I don't want to say, yeah, I mean, I did not value Sage highly when she first came out, but I think that she is quite good, quite strong because of her interaction in junk decks, and I've also started to see her see play in Mr. Negative decks a lot recently, especially in Mr. Negative decks that are also doing like silly things with Wong. And for that reason, like Sage is not something that can go into every deck, but she is a lot of points. Sometimes she's like just the win condition in the deck, in these Mr. Negative decks and in these junk decks. So I think that Sage is, yeah, a lot better than I initially thought she was. I feel pretty confident about slotting her right into the A tier. And then I'm going to get to some S tier cards. I think that Scarlet Spider is the best card of the season. This is, so 4/5, activate, make an exact clone. This is a 4/10 with the only small drawback being that it takes up 2 spots on your field in 2 different locations. But there are also some crazy upsides to this card. You can copy it with, I mean, Shuri might be a little bit too much, but you can copy it with, or pump it up with Forge even, and get a lot more power out of it. Any pumps that you put into this, you could pump it up with the Gwen. What is that card called? Gwen, it's just called Gwen Stacy? Oh, Gwenpool. Gwenpool, that's what it's called. Pump it up with Gwenpool, and then all of a sudden you're giving it +4 for each of the pumps that land on it. I think that this is quite good, and I'd potentially even put it at A tier, because that's how good I think it is. I think that this card is going to get a nerf. I think it probably goes down to a 4/4, or we might see it become a 5/6 or something like that. But this card is just, yeah, I think way too good, and I think that we will see a nerf to it. So that's kind of like, go at your own risk, because I think this card is so good that it's going to get nerfed. So it will eventually be worse, if all that makes sense. And to round out our Spotlight caches for this season, we also have White Widow, which I think is one of the best cards right now in Marvel Snap. It's been nerfed a few times, but it's still really good. Junk is a really oppressive strategy when it's good, and assuming White Widow like doesn't get changed, Junk is kind of, as I've started to realize recently, Junk is a strategy that can kind of only get better over time. There are different ways to get around Junk with Destroy and Bounce and things like that that could keep Junk at bay. But ultimately, I mean, what I'm getting at here is any like junk card that gets printed, like Hawkeye Kate Bishop, just makes every existing junk card better, and it really reached a critical mass when White Widow was printed. Similar way that like any, any mill card, and Silver Sable is like a borderline mill card. Any mill card is going to make all other mill cards a little bit more powerful, because when those decks hit like a critical mass, then they're all greater than the sum of their parts. And White Widow is just a really good part. It is a 2/5, it's a silk, it can win weird locations like Luke's Bar and Death's Domain, and it's a fantastic jump card. So this card is across the board really fantastic. The only drawback, it makes their Mockingbirds cheaper, but definitely one of the best cards right now in Marvel Snap. It's probably better than Mockingbird, but Mockingbird's really good in RSM, but I don't know. Either way, both of these cards are really fantastic, and you can see what my recommendation here is. I'm going to be opening up for Scarlet Spider, and I actually don't have White Widow. I do have Scar. I previously spent 6,000 tokens on Scar. Thought it was an S tier. It was good. I was playing it in Thanos for a little bit, but that has definitely gone out of stock recently. I do think Scar decks are still fun, but they're borderline here with like Silk in terms of how much play they're seeing recently. But Scar's an interesting one because it's a build around card, so it's less splashable than Silk. Silk can really just go in any deck. Scar doesn't really have that same upside, but I also like to reward cards for having cool build around mechanics. I wish I could reward Ms. Marvel more for that, but like I said, right now Junk is just way too popular and way too powerful as well, that I think is really keeping Ms. Marvel here at bay. Arana is the second best new card coming to Spotlight Caches this season, and yeah, not super impressive to me for the decks that I want to play. This is an interesting month where we've got like some cards with the move. So I think a lot of players are probably going for Scarlet Spider and Silver Sable. I'll tell you what I'm personally doing. I'm going to open up for Scarlet Spider. I'm going to grab the White Widow. I will probably try to grab Sage as well because I don't have it. So grabbing, well, let's remove some of these older cards so that they aren't confusing us here anymore. Oh, I can't. I no longer can do that. Oh well. Point is, I think S and A tier cards, you're going to want to make sure that you have all of them. And because I only have one new card that I think is S and A tier, I'm going to pick this up. It's going to get nerfed. I'm going to be like, all right, it happens. And I'll also pick up Sage, Alioth, White Widow, Mockingbird, and Hawkeye, of whichever of those that I don't have. And then I'm going to save my Spotlight keys. I'm going to save my Spotlight keys for next season. You can't because Mockingbird and Sage and White Widow, these are all coming on different weeks, and Alioth, they're all coming on different weeks, so you might not be able to get everything, but if you like some of the new cards and they go along with S and A tier cards, it's just a little bit more incentive. It's really hard to break down what you should be doing in Marvel Snap because everyone's collection is so different, everyone's resources are so different, but what I'm getting at here, I'm personally going to be opening up for White Widow and Scarlet Spider, and then I'm going to be saving my Spotlight keys for future seasons. And the more you do that, the more you will then have the flexibility. I currently have 20 Spotlight keys because I practice what I preach. Everything that I say here is my advice. Like, I did not get Speed, I did not get Emperor Hulkling, and this season I'm not going to get Silver Sable, Madam Web, or Aranya. And that's just how it is. You got to pick which cards you want, and I'm trying to help inform what cards I think you should want, and the kind of less you get, the more you can potentially be able to get in the future, or if you wind up getting unlucky trying to open up some things. So that is going to be it for me today. That is all my advice. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.